بن محمد وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين واللعنة على أعدائهم أجمعين من الآن إلى قيام يوم الدين. أما بعد، فقد قال الله تعالى في محكم كتابه الحكيم: بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إن الصفا والمروة من شعائر الله، فمن حج البيت أو اعتمر فلا جناح عليه أن يطوف بهما، ومن تطوع خيرا فإن الله شاكر عليم. آمنا بالله، صدق الله العلي العظيم. Your second salawat for love of Muhammad wa Ali Muhammad. And your loudest salawat for ta'ajil faraj sahib al-asr wa zaman. Salli ala Muhammad wa Ali Muhammad. Alhamdulillah, for this to be our first majlis. Tonight we're still waiting for the confirmation whether it will be the first of Muharram or not. So it is depending upon moon sighting. And inshallah, it seems that this will be the first night. However, it's good that if anyone can, if you go outside and you look for the moon right around the time of Maghrib, it should be possible to see the moon, and this way we can determine if this will be the first night of the month of Muharram. Tonight, my interest was in establishing some fundamentals of what it is that we want to do in this month of Muharram. What we say is the tamheed, or the preamble of the discourse of what it is we want to accomplish and why it is we want to accomplish this and why it is that we're here. First and foremost, it's a blessing to be here for all of us. But last year, there were those with us who benefited from this month, who gained hidayah, who benefited and changed, and Allah returned them to Himself. But Allah gave us the tawfiq to be here this year, to be alive, to benefit again from this month. And it's not a small blessing. It is a great blessing that amongst all of the societies and humanity and people that exist on this earth, that we have built a relationship with Ahlul Bayt, and we honor that relationship and we participate. And we are trying to be amongst those who, when the Imam speaks, Shi'atuna yafrahuna bifarhina wa yahzanuna bihuznina, that our Shia are those who are happy when we are happy and are sad when we are sad. So we make an effort, we exert an effort to be here. Whenever it comes to an action that we participate in, there is a natural benefit that comes and there is an exerted effort that comes. Meaning some things will happen regardless of how much effort I put into it. There will be a conclusion that it comes to me. And then there are other items that when I exert greater effort, I attain a greater reward. And as such, Mahe Muharram and the change it brings into us and the opportunity and connection with Ahlul Bayt that we have, it has a natural status that will continue to develop slowly and gradually. And there is something that if we focus upon it, we can increase our connection and attachment to Ahlul Bayt through the barakat of this month. So the question is how do we grow to the point where it's that intentional connection and benefit that we're receiving? And as such, there are 3 points I want to discuss, and hopefully with some elaboration in them, if you'll participate with me in your salawat ala Muhammad wa Ali Muhammad. The first of these points begins with the idea of understanding that what is my responsibility when I come to the majlis? Now, to understand this, right, there's a discussion between what is the responsibility of the one who sits here and the one who sits there. Let me talk about myself first, and then we'll talk about you. In a good way, not in a bad way, good way. First and foremost, to understand is that someone who takes the responsibility to speak for the Ahlul Bayt takes on a responsibility and an obligation upon themselves. And when we look for someone, we look for someone who possesses scholarship. Now, scholarship and speaking are two different categories. The easiest way to understand this is is that scholarship is someone who is focused on the access and attaining of knowledge, like gold. This person spends their life on collecting and amassing this gold. The speaker is someone who is like a goldsmith. He takes this material, he beautifies it, makes it something special and desirable, and presents it to the audience. Now, not everyone who possesses gold is a goldsmith, and not everyone who is a goldsmith possesses gold. So what happens is sometimes we'll find people who are incredibly knowledgeable. Some of our ulama are great ulama. But if you ask them to give a speech, it's very difficult for them. To present everything that they possess and to give it to an audience is very difficult. How do I take what's inside of me and give it to someone is very hard. And then we have other people who are very eloquent speakers, but they're missing knowledge. So now a goldsmith, when he doesn't have gold, what does he use to make? Anything he can find. Anything that he can find, any story, any event, anything, and he brings that and he tries to spin it into something that is an eloquence of speech. The speaker's desire and responsibility, and what we look for in a speaker who's qualified to present the majalis, is someone who both possesses the gold and is a goldsmith, so that he takes that knowledge that exists and presents it to us in a way that we can learn from it and benefit from it. That's my job. Your job. Everybody's okay? Your responsibility is that when we come to the majlis, it's not about the entertainment. It's not about the eloquence of the person's words. It's that I'm on the lookout for that gold. I'm looking for that gold. I'm looking for that knowledge. I'm looking for that relationship. I'm paying attention. Is this bringing me to Quran and Ahlul Bayt, or is this taking me away from them? I'm focused and I'm attentive. It's not, if we want to grow in this process, it won't be sufficient that we came and that we sat, but rather that we established a filter and we researched, am I attaining something? What am I attaining? What am I accomplishing? How am I developing? What is my relationship with Quran and Ahlul Bayt? How is it changing from these experiences? And some of this, for our younger audiences, it's something we have to do as a responsibility to assist them in this process. And this is how we do it. That when you sit in the car, you ask them, what did you hear? What did you understand? Now, if I haven't been listening, I can't ask my son that question or my daughter, because then I don't know when they tell me something if it was right or wrong. So the obligation comes on me to first listen and pay attention. And then I can engage in that conversation with my child or with my family, with my spouse, in the process of what was our understanding. One of the traditions of even the Hawza is something called mubahatha, debate, discussion. What it says is, after you've listened to the lesson, repeat the lesson to the best of your ability to your classmate. So if we come to this class with a classmate, our obligation becomes to be an active participant and listener and to stay focused that there is something I need to take, and I work to make sure that I take that item. As part of this comes the discussion that if I am here to attain something, I need to accomplish something, I have the desire that my community attain it with me. Especially when it comes to the traditions of Aza, we have traditions that reflect our religiosity and our desire and our relationship with Ahlul Bayt. And we want our community to participate in them. And alhamdulillah, with a multicultural community, we have many different aspects of the ideology of what does Muharram represent that exists for us. It's important to remember that my love of Muharram and understanding and knowledge of Muharram wasn't always like this. I grew and I changed and I learned, and over time, my relationship with the Aza of Ahlul Bayt, the learning of Ahlul Bayt, changed and grew as well. That's who I am today, and how I understand the majalis is not the way I always understood the majalis. So if we see in our community and our people that they don't reflect and understand and they don't appreciate the majlis that we're sitting in the way that we do, it shouldn't be a point of criticism. It should be a place of welcoming, to invite them to participate, that someday their relationship will grow as well too. There's a famous story. You guys are okay with the story? I'll tell a small story. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. There's this story that says that in a village they had their masjid, and in the masjid they would have their Maulana come in Muharram and sit, and the young men would sit outside. And eventually the elders, not saying anything to anybody here, but the elders complained and they said, Maulana, all the young men are outside. They only come in at the end when there's matam and then there's food. Tell them to come inside. And Maulana thought about it. He said, point's valid. It's a good point. So the next night he comes, he recites his majlis and he says, you young boys who are sitting outside, who don't come in till the end, maybe it would be better if you didn't come if you won't come for the majlis. And he yelled at them. He reprimanded them for their behavior. That night it said that in his dream he had the opportunity to see Imam al-Hussain alayhi salam. Upon seeing the Imam, he goes and he presents a salam to the Imam, and the Imam refuses to acknowledge him. And he realizes, I must have done something wrong. He again presents his salam. Again, the Imam turns away from him. Third time, he begs the Imam, Ya ibn Rasulullah, what did I do wrong? The Imam replies, he says, they came for me. Who are you to turn them away from me? Who are you to tell them not to come? The significance of the message of the story is that this is one of the tools of hidayah that comes. But it is not the only tool of hidayah. Meaning that when we are here together, the akhlaq, the tarbiyah, the mannerism, some of it is reflected in this majlis and some of it is reflected after the majlis. When we say salam to each other, when we sit with each other, when we help each other, that for whatever reason a person makes the ability to come here, welcome them. One of the mistakes that we make is, when we see someone after a long time that they show up, usually around like the 8th or 9th, we say, ab aage. Chand nikal aaya. Moon's out now. Now you're here. It's a very poor quality. It's a very bad quality. That whatever it was that brought him here, now I'm the one who's telling him don't come. Because the next time he makes the intention or she makes the intention to come, she's going to think, the people will bother me again. They will talk bad about me again. Forget it. Let me not go at all. And we took that process of hidayah away from someone. This is what it means when my style of religiosity, my style of love of Ahlul Bayt has grown to the point that I know to be here for these majalis. But maybe somebody isn't there yet. Maybe they're growing, they're learning. It's my job to make it easy for them to learn and grow and for them to feel welcome. That if they want to take one step in this direction, that I make that step easier. I make it easy to take the next step by welcoming them, by acknowledging these differences and saying, it's okay, come. Build that relationship. Which brings us to the point that it is important to come to these majalis. It is important to be part of this conversation. Remember, when we talk about jihad, jihad is of two types, right? That which is with the sword, which is jihad asghar. And that jihad which is in myself, which is jihad akbar. That jihad akbar is the struggle against myself to attain something. Which is why that level of self-control I need to come to this majlis is very difficult and it needs to be appreciated. And each of us needs to work on it. What we can attain in this majlis, we can't attain at home on our sofa. Maybe I can watch 10 majlis on my sofa at home. But the barakat is here, not there. How? One, as we mentioned, when we collect here, there are many benefits that we gain. When we sit together, when we talk to each other, when we help each other, when we support each other, the participation in the majlis. This is what's called farshe azah, the ground upon which the ceremonies are commemorated. There are narrations that tell us that the malaika come and rub their wings on this ground to attain a perfume that cannot be found anywhere else. That amongst them is the fakhr, they have pride over this, that they have attained the perfume from the majlis of Imam Hussain. So to come is difficult. It is. And that's what that jihad an-nafs is. It's overcoming my desires. It's overcoming my comfort. It's overcoming all of the distractions and problems and relaxation after a long day of work to be here. It's very difficult. But that's where the effort is. That's where the juhud and struggle is. That's what jihadun nafs brings us to. Which now says that if we're here, it brings us to our second point, participating in the majlis of Imam Hussain. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Sallu ala Muhammad. Once we've attended, now our goal is to participate, to be somehow associated with this majlis. The idea of the recitation and the association of this majlis is something that the Ahlul Bayt used to teach, whether we take a look at our 6th Imam, our 8th Imam, our 4th Imam. We used to invite people to recite poetry. And they would promise great rewards and give reward in dunya and in akhirah for this effort. There are many narrations on this level that talk about how they brought alive the azah of Imam Hussain. From our 8th Imam, the structure of the majlis comes from the 8th Imam. Why? When he sat in the courts of Ma'mun, he established the majlis and invited people and would invite people to come and recite and participate. And explain that in these days, we have to behave differently. The majlis is important. For each of us who participates in this majlis, there is a great reward. And some of us, we participate through speaking, through reciting latam, through reciting the marsiyah, through reciting the ziyarat. All of these are great efforts. But even if one doesn't practice in this way, there are still many ways of participating in the majlis, which may be, for example, cleaning an area, putting away the shoes, serving of the food, preparing for salat. All of these are points by which we register ourselves amongst those who participated and served in the majlis of the Imam. And to understand the importance and value of this, we have a hadith from our Holy Prophet Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Whenever a mu'min serves the believers, Allah creates for him in heaven a servant for every believer he served. Now the difference here is that I only have to serve the believer today. That servant will serve me forever. So the sacrifice that we make in honor of this service, the sacrifice that we make in honor of this presence, is something that has a great reward. It's something that we should be fighting and vying for, not wondering, if nobody else does it, then I'll do it. It should be that, no, I want to be the one to take advantage of this. And this is where it's an amazing point, right? That we take something, for example, we take something, picking up one piece of trash off this floor. When I do it in my house, maybe there's no reward for it. But when I do it in this house, there's a great reward for it. Why? Because of the intention that I made for this action. To understand this, there's this discussion that we began our majlis with from Surah Baqarah in verse number 158. Inna Safa wal Marwata min sha'airillah. That certainly Safa and Marwa are among the symbols of Allah. And Allah continues this verse and he says, so whoever makes the pilgrimage or to the house or performs Umrah, therefore there is no blame on him to go around them both. Now, when we look at Hajj, can you do Hajj without Safa and Marwa? No. Then why is Allah saying there's no blame? La junaha alayhim. There's no blame on them if they go around Safa and Marwa. To understand this, we have to look at the tafsir. We have to look at the context in which this verse was revealed. Prior to the advent of Islam, the mushrikeen, the polytheists, used to perform the actions of Hajj as well too. And they would perform the sa'i as well of running between Safa and Marwa. But what they had done is they had taken two of their idols and placed one idol on Safa and one idol on Marwa. And they would run between these idols. When our Prophet came and established the practices of Hajj, the Muslims said, no, we don't do that. That's what the idol worshippers do. The idol worshippers run between Safa and Marwa. But Rasulullah commanded them to perform this action, and then Allah gave its emphasis in this verse. And he explained to them that Safa and Marwa don't belong to the idols, they belong to Allah. They are sha'airillah. They are the symbols of Allah. And whoever does Hajj or Umrah has to do this action, there is no sin on him. Meaning, the action is the same. running between Safa and Marwa, whether you are a Muslim or a mushrik, you will perform the action. But the mushrik performing this action has no reward for it. The Muslim performing this action is attaining proximity to Allah through the action. Meaning the intention of who the action is performed for increases in the reward. Our participation in these majalis, why do we believe that there is a reward for it? Because we do it in the name of Imam Hussain to connect closer to Allah. We do it in the name of Ahlul Bayt, seeking proximity of Allah, that, oh Allah, this is your sha'air, and I am performing the action to get closer to you by getting closer to him. Now, understanding this, when we have a diverse community, there are many different practices that come from each community. Sometimes we look at these practices and we don't understand them. So how, Shlon, how is this possible that this is your practice, this is my practice? Why are they so different? Didn't we all follow the same religion? Yes. But the idea and the permission of culture to exist in religion is allowed. And each culture brings a practice. And as long as the intention to attain proximity to Allah, there's no problem with the practice. It may look to us from the outside that it looks different. We don't understand it. The only people we've seen it now are some other people do these things. But what does Allah say? If it is for me, if it's with the intention of seeking proximity to me, then I allow you to perform this action. So it's important for us to understand that the intention of serving for the cause of Imam Hussain is based upon the intention. That can take anything that we are performing. It may seem like a normal task, vacuuming the carpet, throwing out the garbage, but suddenly it's become ibadat. Because my goal is now Allah. I'm conscious of who I'm doing it for and what I'm trying to achieve. And there's a compensation for it. Which is why our first step is come to the majlis, understand the value that there is something in the majlis that I need to listen to and pay attention to. 2, participate in the majlis. 3, with your loudest of salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Ya Ali, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Is the aspect of crying for Imam Hussain. Now, as we get into this discussion, our topic across the next 9 nights that we'll discuss is justice and adalat. And why is this justice so necessary for us, and what is its role in our life? These majalis, one of their ways of enlivening us is bringing closer to the idea of the justice that we need to possess in our life. One of the wasila to get there is the weeping over Ahlul Bayt. The idea, when we take a look at the majlis of Imam Hussain versus the masa'ib of the other a'imma, of the other imams, is that this was something unique. Our 7th Imam suffered excessively. But the 8th Imam didn't teach us to cry for his father, he taught us to cry for Imam Hussain. The Masa'ib are of a 4th Imam. He suffered greatly. Yet you look at his life for 34 years after Waqia of Karbala, he never cried, oh, look what happened to me. He cried, look what happened to my father. The weeping over Imam Hussain is something our Prophet began. The weeping over Imam Hussain is something our Imam of our time describes, and he says that I was separated from you. I cry blood in place of tears over you, O Father. This weeping is something very significant in building and establishing in our character. And it is an important catalyst that if we're missing this, the journey to Allah becomes harder. To understand this, we look at the statement of our master Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam. When our Imam makes a statement, translated for brevity's sake, he says, tears do not dry up except for the hardening of hearts. Hearts do not harden except for the excessiveness of sin. Man has a habit of being unjust to himself. When we sin, it's not Allah who is hurt. It is we who are hurt. The Sharia that Allah has established and taught to us is with the purpose that man needs a manual. Same way when I purchase a car, it gives me a manual. Do these things and your car will operate well. If you don't do these things, your car will break. Allah said, I created humanity and then I gave them Sharia, I gave them Islam, I gave them religion, and I gave them doctrine as a manual. Do these things and it will benefit you. You don't do these things, it doesn't harm Allah. Allah doesn't suffer. Allah is not hurt by this. Allah is not upset by this. You suffer for it. We suffer for it. We are the ones who go through loss because of our actions, not Allah. And we'll talk about this more in the nights that come about what does this mean in the justice of Allah. But the one aspect of injustice that we do to ourselves is that when we sin, we perform an injustice on ourselves, and that injustice has a consequence. It separates us from the desire to turn back to Allah. It separates us from the desire of becoming a better person. We become obstinate. We become someone, so what? Until we get to such a point and such a negative point that we lose hope in Allah because of the excessiveness of our sinning. And na'uzubillah, we make a statement that is known as ya'as, hopelessness. And the most frightening type of hopelessness is when a person makes a statement, he says, well, I'm going to hell anyway. That's haram. You should never think like that. Imagine that you make that statement and that's the last statement that you say, Allah takes your life. Because you don't know how long you're going to live. We don't know how long our life is. The last thing I say is, well, I'm going to hell. Allah says, Khuda Hafiz, there you go, done. There are examples of this. There are actors and actresses and singers and people and poets who write about their evil and write about their misdeeds or act in mischievous ways thinking that I'll repent later. Well, what's the problem? I've done it anyway. And then Allah takes their life away from them. We never want to be hopeless in Allah. We never want to lose our hope that the mercy of Allah is available to us. But what brings us there is when we do injustice to ourselves, when we abuse ourselves, when we don't understand this concept of justice and why it's so important in our faith. And Imam is explaining one of the consequences of this injustice, where he makes the statement and he begins with, and he says, tears do not dry up except for the hardening of hearts. Hearts do not harden except for the excessiveness of sin. And when we start to sin, we start this process of sinning, we start to lose hope in Allah until eventually our heart becomes hard and we don't care anymore if Allah is angry with us or happy with us. We've lost that thought altogether. And when that happens, that we've lost this thought of caring about what Allah thinks and our heart has hardened, our tears go away. The tears are an important tool. That when I make dua to Allah, one of the ways that I look for acceptance of Allah is to have khuzu and khushu. To think about Allah, to weep in front of Allah, to ask for His mercy. The weeping in front of Allah is so significant and important that there is one statement that Sayyidah Zahra salamullahi alayha asked in her final wasiyah, according to some narrations, "Oh Ali, bury this vial with me." And when Amir al-Mu'mineen asked, "What is this vial that you ask me? What is this bottle that you ask me?" She replies, "Oh Ali, these are the tears that I wept in the fear of Allah when I prayed to Him. I want to present them in front of my Lord on the Day of Judgment." Crying in front of Allah. Zahra is teaching us this. Sayyidah is teaching us this, that this is one of the important aspects. We look at the weeping of those Anbiya. We look at the weeping of Adam. He's one of the Bakaun, one of the criers in this world, to seek the mercy of Allah. Yaqub, who wept in front of Allah until his eyes became white. Yusuf, who would weep in the prison until they said that, "Oh Yusuf, you weep day and night. The prisoners cannot find relief. Either pray in the day, weep in the day, or weep in the night." But what the huzn of Yusuf was so much. The sorrow of Yusuf in front of Allah. Did Yusuf commit a sin? No. Was he crying because he was being punished? No. He was crying for the mercy of Allah, that, oh Allah, the difficulties that I go through, remove them from me. Bring me closer to you. So this weeping became the wasila by which the dua is answered, by which we attain proximity to Allah. And our injustice, one of the actions and consequences of this injustice and abuse that we do, is that I lose this ability to speak to Allah in this way. I can read the words, but I don't weep. I read the words, but no reaction comes. No desire grows in my heart. No fear of Allah grows in my heart. When we look at the words, for example, in Dua Kumail, there's a section where we talk to Allah and we say, oh Allah, my body is frail, my constituency is weak, and these difficulties of this world are difficult for me. Then how can I handle the difficulties of the hereafter? How will I be able to handle that where there will be no end? How will I be able to handle that when the pain and the punishment and your displeasure will be permanent from me? We talk to Allah in this dua kumail and we say to him, oh Allah, I could accept the fire, but how can I accept being separated from you? We read this, we don't think about it. Why? We've separated ourselves from the mercy of Allah. That the acknowledgement and that consciousness, and this is our excessiveness, this is the injustice. Humanity has a problem where whatever mistakes we make, there's a consequence. The punishment is in akhirah. That's punishment there. Here there is consequence. That the consequence of our misdeeds is that we are winding up separated from Allah, and we can't get back to Him because of the gap that we keep creating from Him. The mercy of Ahlul Bayt, the mercy of these people, is when Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam says, Inna al-Husayna misbah al-huda was safinatun najat. That certainly Hussein is the light of guidance and the ark of salvation. Someone asked our sixth Imam, Rasulullah, aren't you all ark of salvation? Aren't you all safinatun najat? Aren't you all misbah al-huda? The Imam replies, yes, but the safina of Hussein is wider and faster than ours. Why? Because in the masa'ib of Imam Hussein, in the difficulty of Imam Hussein, Allah put in elixir of a cure to fix this gap between our sins, something that brings us back to Allah quickly. And that is the crying over Imam Hussein. That when we weep for Imam Hussein, anyone who weeps in the majlis for Imam Hussein, your heart goes through a revolution. In that moment, you'll give anything. Oh Allah, make me with Hussein. Don't separate me from him. That revolution, that inqilab that happens in our heart by that love from those tears, brings us right back to the door of Allah. It cleans the rust of sinning from our hearts, that when you leave the majlis, you want to be a better person. You want to make change in your heart. And that's the wasila, the mention of the Masa'ib of Abu Abdullah. That's the connection that we attain, that it corrects and brings us back quickly. That it's something unique that otherwise I would have to work very hard to think. And I should, in that moment, I should ask Allah for forgiveness of all of my sins. Everything that, oh Allah, has become a barrier between me and you, remove it. Make me one of those people that this Imam who I cry tears over, he would be happy with me. That if he was to see me now, I would not be ashamed to stand in front of him. I would not have to think what's the right decision to make. I would not do those actions that hurt this person that brings tears to my eyes. This is why one of the most important steps of this majlis is to cry. Ahlul Bayt explained it in such a way, they said, cry. If you can make someone cry, make them cry. If you can't make someone cry, make yourself cry. If you can't cry, fake the cry. Our sixth Imam makes the promise. He says, if you cried, even fake cried, a tear the size of a wing of a fly, it would be your wasila of najat. It would be a source of your success in akhirah. Meaning that we need this. We need to be conscious of this. We have to teach our generations about this. We shouldn't be that when we sit in the majlis, we look and we say, oh, no, I've heard this one before. No, that's the wasila that brings my heart to Imam Hussain. Now, there's a few things that are important in this. Few things to build the culture. Because this is a culture that we have to build. If we can understand this is important, we need to build a culture. When it comes to our next generation, to educate them about this, one of the techniques to do this is sit them with you in a majlis. Sit your child at your knee, right in front of you. You see, the culture here teaches our children, don't cry. It's emasculine. Don't cry, it's weakness. Maybe for my own affairs, it is weakness to cry over my own masa'ib. We don't want to do that. But to cry for Ahlul Bayt is important. If they don't see me cry, they won't learn to cry on their own, that this is an expression that I have to develop. Create the environment to cry. Whether it's we turn off the lights, whether we cry out loud that promotes others to weep for Imam Hussain, whether it's that we welcome this expression, however we can, we make it easy for the participants that when that majlis begins, that everyone has the opportunity to attain this arc of salvation. Now, one of the mistakes that happens is sometimes, and that's it, in the contemporary culture where we've been separated from our history, saying, Baba, what's the point of this? Imam wants me to be a good Muslim, give me 10 lectures, why do I need to cry? They've lost the spirituality. It's gone. We didn't save the culture there. We lost the culture. That Islam is not just, for example, the knowledge that we attain. This is very important, to attain knowledge, to ibadat. But our spirit, that work that it needs, the spirit, the engagement that it needs, is the evoking of this emotion and love of Ahlul Bayt. So we've come to the conclusion. We've come to the conclusion that this weeping wasn't something that we chose. See, other forms of aza, we chose how to perform them. The poetry, we chose how we want to recite it, what we want to recite. The weeping wasn't our choice. The weeping was a lesson. That lesson isn't something we said it's a lesson. No, they established the example that if you are going to cry, if you want to come back to us, come through this Hussain. Which is why the example of Rasulullah weeping for Imam Hussain are two narrations in this that hurt the heart, but they're important to mention. That one example says that Rasulullah would take Hussain in his lap and kiss his neck. He said, Ya Rasulullah, why do you kiss the neck of this Hussain? Because they will cut this neck and slaughter my son. The other one says that we would see Rasulullah kiss the entire body of Imam Hussain in his lap. Rasulullah would take this child, put him in his arms and begin to kiss him from head to toe. Every place he would kiss him. He said, Ya Rasulullah, why do you kiss Hussain like this? Oh, my dear believers, they will cut, my ummah will injure. Every place I kiss is a place of injury of Abu Abdullah. That my Hussain will be injured in this way, that his whole body will be covered in injuries. Abu Abdullah wept before his birth. Abu Abdullah wept after his birth. In one of the famous narrations, it says that when Imam Hussain and was still a small child, Rasulullah came to the house of Ali and Fatima. He prayed in their house and afterwards went into sujood and began to cry. Amir al-Mu'mineen, looking at the bitterness of the weeping of Rasulullah, had not the heart. Fatima could not ask Rasulullah. This one Hussain came, sat in the lap of his grandfather, holding his grandfather against his chest. Mada yubkika ya Rasulullah? What made you cry, ya Rasulullah? Rasulullah replies, he says, Jibreel has come and reminded me again of the masahib they will put my Hussain through, of the difficulty with which he will be killed. When the end of our Prophet's life came and he was presented with the Lawh Mahfuz, the tablets upon which the actions and responsibilities of each of the Aimma after him was placed, he said that Allah has commanded each of us to accept our responsibility and submit to it. I have submitted. Oh, Ali, do you submit? Ali ibn Abi Talib reads the tablet, says, I submit. Sayyidah Zahra reads the tablet, I submit. Then she looks at the name of her son Hussein. She says, Ya Rasulullah, they will kill my son. Ya Rasulullah, will you be with him? No, I will not be with him. Will Ali be with him? No, Ali will not be with him. Will Hassan be with him? No, Hassan will not be with him. Will I be with him? No, Fatima, you will not be with him. قتل الحسين غريبا عطشانا وحيدا فريدا. Oh, Fatima, Hussein will be killed alone as a stranger, thirsty, in a foreign land. None will be with him. They said upon hearing this, Sayyidah Zahra lost consciousness. When she awoke, she says, who will come to my Hussein? Rasulullah gives her comfort. He says, Allah will raise a nation that will love your children and will sit by their grave and will be in the company of Hussein and will not forget his sacrifice. The weeping of Rasul, of the Ummah, is the teaching of Rasulullah, the dua of Rasulullah for the weeping of Zahra. This is why when we look and we see that Imam Hassan in his final moments, as he is colored green by the poison, Abu Abdullah weeps for him. Imam Hassan says, oh Hussein, why do you weep? He says, brother, I weep on your condition. Imam Hassan begins to cry. Imam Hussein says, oh brother, you are in ihtidar. The pain is in your body. Why are you crying? He says, Hussein, you are with me today. I weep for tomorrow when no one will be with you. Imam Zainul Abidin, 34 years would weep. When they would not let him go to the markets where they would slaughter animals. By chance, the Imam would see a sheep about to be slaughtered. He would say, oh butcher, did you give this sheep water? The butcher would reply, Yabna Rasulullah, it is the teaching of Rasulullah that we do not slaughter an animal without giving them water. Imam Zainul Abidin would turn to Karbala, Baba, they treat the sheep better than they treated you. Imam Sadiq would invite people like Abu Harun. He would invite Abu Harun to his house and say, Abu Harun, recite the poetry of my father Hussein. Abu Harun would begin reciting the poetry and Abu Abdullah would say, no, not like that. Abu Harun, recite that poetry that makes people cry. I want to cry for my father. Abu Harun would begin reciting. Imam Sadiq would begin crying. The women of the house would begin crying. Abu Harun would stop. He said, Yabna Rasulullah, the women are weeping. He says, my mother Zahra and Karbala wept as well too. Imam Sadiq did not stop the crying for this. He told us, cry. There is the teachings of Imam al-Rida. In the court of Ma'mun, he would have the majlis. There is the famous poetry that was recited by Du'bal that described the condition that if Zahra had seen Hussein killed alone on the side of Furat, they said that when Du'bal recited this poetry, Imam Rida would fall from the seat. Du'bal would stop and Yabna Rasulullah, I can't see you in pain. Imam Rida would say, no, Du'bal, recite again. Again, he would recite. If it was that Fatima was to see how Hussein has been killed alone by the side of Furat, she would strike her cheeks. Imam Rida again falls again. He says, Du'bal, recite again. He says, Yabna Rasulullah, why do you fall when I recite? He says, oh Du'bal, it is as if I could see my mother Zahra striking her face over the Masaib of my father Hussein. وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون. Ya Allah, بحق زهراء وأبيها وبعلها وبنيها والسر المستودع فيها. Ya Allah, accept this small ibadat from us. Ya Allah, forgive our sins, cover our flaws. Ya Allah, give the thawab of this majlis to our marhumin and the mu'mineen who are in need of dua. Ya Allah, keep our children on the upright religion of Islam. Ya Allah, those amongst our families, our communities, the mu'mineen who are suffering through sickness, give the mu'mineen shifa wherever they may be. Ya Allah, give the mu'mineen who are struggling through difficulties aman wherever they are. Hasten the reappearance of Sahib al-Zaman. Make us and our offspring from the supporters of Imam al-Zaman, and entitle us to the Shafa of Abdullah in dunya and akhirah. Matim Hussain.